Hello, my fellow apes. Before getting to Stefan Molyneux, here's a quick update on the Debunked Kickstarter. All decks are now bolstered to nearly 100 cards, and here's just a few examples of the most recently developed. The artist is incredibly talented, right? I mean, how cool is this Galileo Galilei design? Anyhow, there's now just 1 week left to go, and so if you want your apish hands on these cards, then now's your chance to grab them. Thank you.
So he's going to say, well, human beings are not the best at stuff. But my question is, why doesn't he have a sea slug present his information? Why didn't he just have a little, like, put the sea slug on the table and have the sea slug explain why UPB is wrong? Right now, man is the most successful species by just about any metric whatsoever. So I would consider that one pretty much asked and answered.
Towards the end of my recent debunk of Stefan Molyneux's universally preferable behaviour, I wrapped up by saying the following. So, if you want me to make another video, you ought to leave a comment saying so. And by the gods that don't exist, you've made your preference crystal clear. Now, within my previous video, I consciously avoided minutiae in order to succinctly focus on Stefan's primary argument, or largest fire, if you will. He said it is the case that they're wrong.
They're objectively wrong.
And so therefore they ought to correct their beliefs.
And they should correct their beliefs.
But as any undergraduate philosophy student will tell you, this simply doesn't follow.
Dude.
But within this video, I'm going to extinguish one of his smaller fires, that being the assertion that man is the most successful organism.
Man is the most successful organism.
This is Stefan Molyneux versus the world. Typically, I like to keep my content concise, as time is precious and I don't want to waste yours. But Stefan has a habit of accusing critics, including me, of strawmanning him.
So your idea of an argument is a straw man. It was a literal straw man, right? Instant straw man. Boom! Perfect straw man.
Given this, I'm going to play and respond to the majority of Stefan's response rather than just the crux. And so, here we go.
And finally, we get to Molyneux's fifth proof, and it goes as follows.
1. Organisms succeed by acting upon universally preferable behavior. 2. Man is the most successful organism. 3. Therefore, man must have acted most successfully on the basis of universally preferable behavior. 4. Man's mind is his most distinctive organ. 5. Therefore, man's mind must have acted most successfully on the basis of universally preferable behavior. 6. Therefore, universally preferable behavior must be valid.
Premise 1 is again begging the question. In fact, it's almost identical to the second proof's first premise, that all organisms require universally preferred behavior to live, and it carries all of the same problems. As for premise 2,
before moving on, notice that Stefan completely ignores this criticism. I addressed this in detail in my previous video, and so won't do so again here, but I want to emphasise it because it's important to note that his argument is flawed for many more reasons than just the one I'm going to focus on within this video, which we'll get to now.
As for premise 2, the assertion that man is the most successful species, this is just childishly absurd, because it's arbitrarily assigning significance. What exactly are humans the most successful at?
Philosophy, science, conceptual reasoning, abstract thought, art, music, literature, poetry, acting, singing.
Sure, humans are the most successful organism in regards to the humanities. What a surprise. But as I was about to explain, to assert that an organism's success is dependent on such attributes is completely and utterly arbitrary.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when was the last time you saw chimpanzees and an orchestra opening at the Met, right? So, yeah, there are different levels of success. And human beings are the most successful at such a wide variety of things. I don't even know how to explain this. Like, if you want to really understand or learn about philosophy, you kind of need to look at what you're doing, rather than all these abstractions to begin with. I'm an empiricist, so you start with what you're doing. So he's going to go in like, I don't know, but this next bit is going to be like giraffes are better at getting leaves from the top of trees, which is actually false because you can get a machine to get you. There are machines that you can get it right up there to harvest the stuff from the trees. There are robots that can pick fruit and even strawberries and grapes and so on.
Yeah. When you really want to understand or learn about philosophy, you kind of need to look at what you're doing and not, say, completely fabricate, let alone strawman, your opposition's objections. When Stefan said,
So he's going to go in like, I don't know.
that's where he should have stopped and played my response rather than make it up. At no point did I say that giraffes are better than humans at getting leaves from the top of trees. And yeah.
This next bit is going to be like giraffes are better at getting leaves from the top of trees, which is actually false.
Well done, Stefan. You've rebutted an argument that I didn't make.
Philosophy is not like massaging your single mom's foot.
Indeed, it's not. And so, please, put the massage oil down.
But anyway, so he's going to say, well, human beings are not the best at stuff. But my question is, why doesn't he have a sea slug present his information? Why didn't he just have a little, like, put the sea slug on the table and have the sea slug explain why UPB is wrong? Why doesn't he have a chimpanzee do it? Why doesn't he have a robot do it? Why doesn't he have a piece of paramecium do it? Why doesn't he have one of his gut bacteria come up and spread the word about how bad UPB is? No, he's using his conscious mind. He's using his abstract thought. He's using presentation techniques. He's using YouTube. He's using every single human facility to communicate that human beings are not successful. How successful would he be at rebutting my argument if he didn't use any human capacities? No, I'm not going to make that joke. Too obvious. All right, let's see.
Again, strawman. I have never said that human beings are not successful, and yet
he's using every single human facility to communicate that human beings are not successful.
And as for his point about me not employing a sea slug to rebut his argument, I'm genuinely curious. Does anyone find this compelling? Let me approach this obliquely. If a chimpanzee was to tell another chimpanzee, via chimpanzee capacities, that chimpanzees are not the most successful organism, would there be anything wrong with that? Would there be anything hypocritical or contradictory about it? No, of course not. Likewise, when a human tells another human, via human capacities, that humans are not the most successful organism, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I didn't employ a sea slug because sea slugs are not the most effective way at communicating with human beings. And that's what I was and am trying to achieve.
All right, let's see.
It's not neck length because the giraffe is more successful than us in this area.
No, the giraffe's neck is longer.
Forgive me, I don't want to keep interrupting, but I've really got to hammer this home. If an organism's success is to be judged by its neck length, then giraffes are more successful than us. In fact, this would make them 18 times more successful than us, since the length of the average adult giraffe's neck is 18 times longer than the average adult human's. Now, of course, insisting that an organism's success is dependent on its neck length is arbitrary and quite frankly ridiculous, but that's my point. Insisting that an organism's success is dependent on some quality of the brain, such as the capacity to conceptualize, is as arbitrary as asserting that it's dependent on some quality of the eye, such as the capacity to see ultraviolet, some quality of the heart, such as the capacity to pump oxygen, or even some quality of the larynx, such as the capacity for echolocation. It's arbitrary.
It's not population, because ants are more successful than us in this area. It's not age, because Arctic whales are more successful than us in this area. And it's not reproduction, because rabbits are more successful than us in this area. So what is it? Brain power? How arbitrary?
I don't know that it's that arbitrary. Human beings have the greatest capacity, even if we just look at sort of biological stuff, right? So human beings have the greatest capacity to control the environment to further survival, right? Which is why we can go hugely underwater, very deep in bathyscapes. It's why we can go up high mountains with air packs. It's why we can go into space. It's why we can live in the Arctic without igloos and fur, right? So we have this amazing capacity, why we have pressurized cabins and airplanes and so on. So we do have this incredible ability to adapt the environment to suit our particular needs. And that has to be counted as some degree of biological success, right? Right.
For the purpose of clarity, I want to take us back to basics. What does it mean to say that something is successful? Is, for example, this cup successful? To answer this, we need to know the purpose of the cup, and since we're its creator, we do. It's to hold liquid. Thus, we can say that this cup is successful because its purpose is to hold liquid, and right now it's doing that pretty damn well. But here's the thing. Courtesy of Darwin's evolution by natural selection, we now know that organisms are not imbued with a purpose. The evidence is crystal clear. We were not created by a conscious entity, and so we were not created with a purpose in mind. However, despite this, I appreciate that some argue that nature has unconsciously imbued organisms with the purpose of surviving as a species, and Stefan is evidently among them.
Yeah, it does have something to do with survival.
Okay, survival as a species it is. Now, there are countless ways in which organisms survive. Some have a massive population as to increase gene diversity, others have an incredibly long life expectancy as to have more attempts at reproduction, others forge symbiotic relations with other organisms, others hastily adapt to their environment, and others hastily adapt their environment to them.
Human beings have the greatest capacity to control the environment to further survival.
Now, putting aside whether or not human beings are the best organism at controlling their environment, my original point remains. With there being countless ways in which organisms survive, it's arbitrary to insist that one is, or a handful are, the metric of an organism's success. Honestly, it's like Stefan has started with his conclusion and is working backwards. In terms of survivability, what are humans the best at, and how can I make that, or them, the rubric of an organism's success?
Why should we accept that success is defined by how much brain power an organism has? This isn't just taking the biscuit.
No, because it allows you to control your environment to further your success, right? It allows you to build houses in cold temperatures. It allows you to build cooling in hot temperatures. It allows you to build shelter from winds. And to a degree that animals can't even conceive of, right? So, yeah, it does have something to do with survival, of course, right?
Yes, of course brain power has something to do with survival. And yes, it enables us to significantly control our environment. But again, my objection is that organisms survive through countless methods, and to state that one specific method is, or a handful of methods are, the metric of success is arbitrary.
So the other interesting question is, in terms of success, as far as I remember, I could be wrong, but human beings are the only creatures to live in all areas of the world, right? I mean, you could talk about rabbits, but rabbits are, pretty a narrow band of the world that they can live in. Ants aren't in the Antarctic, ironically enough, right? So human beings, in terms of success, you could at least say human beings are the most widely spread organism that we know of, even if you count like people in space and so on. I don't know if there are like permanent undersea stations, probably are.
So first off, my criticism still remains. There are many ways in which organisms survive, and for Stefan to focus on just the ones that fit his narrative, such as an organism's ability to adapt their environment and an organism's geographic distribution, is to arbitrarily assign significance. Again, he's working backwards. Secondly, notice that Stefan uses the word creature to make his point.
Human beings are the only creatures to live in all areas of the world,
but uses the word organism in his conclusion.
Human beings are the most widely spread organism that we know of.
This might seem pedantic on my part, but it's not, because they mean very different things. The word creature is a synonym of animal and thus pertains merely to the animal kingdom, whereas the word organism refers to all life forms and thus pertains to animals, plants, fungi, and bacteria. Thirdly, and this is, at least to me, particularly funny, even if Stefan's argument used the word creature, he'd still be wrong. 71% of the Earth is covered with water, and we humans don't even inhabit 1% of it. The killer whale, to name but one example, is distributed throughout the majority of the Earth's oceans, including Antarctica. And so what this amounts to is that despite human beings significantly outnumbering killer whales, the latter inhabit significantly more cubic centimeters.
Human beings are the most widely spread organism that we know of.
Nope, we're not even the most widely spread mammal, let alone creature, and definitely let alone organism.
But yeah, there are ways in which you can measure the success of human beings, even just from a biological standpoint. And again, when you're using a lot of technology to argue that it's arbitrary to say there's value in technology, when technology is the only thing that allows you to make that argument, it seems a little specious.
And here we have yet another straw man. I didn't say
it's arbitrary to say there's value in technology.
I said it's arbitrary to say that an organism's success hinges on its capacity for technology, or its brain power, or geographic distribution, or biomass, or capacity for literature, etc.
So there's a distinction between a difference in degree and a difference in kind. A difference in degree is more or less of pretty much the same thing. A difference in kind is something completely different. So think of two guys lost in the desert. One guy has $100 in his pocket, one guy has $10 in his pocket. That's a difference in degree. They have differing levels of money. One guy has a bottle of water or water at all, and the other guy has no bottle of water, no water at all. That's a difference in kind. One has water, one doesn't have water, whereas they have different amounts of money. So if you look at the example provided of the giraffe has a long African hoop neck style neck, for sure. But that's just a difference in degree, not in kind, because human beings also have necks. He says, well, whales can live longer than people. Okay, that is a difference of degree, not of kind, because human beings live for a long time, whales live for a longer time. It's just an extension of something that already is. If you look at the population of ants, well, there are more ants than people, yes, but there are still numbers of people. The number is higher, but the existence of life is simply a difference of degree in terms of numerical number, or of number, rather than of kind, right? So if you're talking about differences of degree rather than of kind, you're missing the entire point of what it means to be a human being. Let me give you an example. So imagine I said something like this. Human beings have flown to the moon, but those ants are not as good at it because their little ant rockets only reach to the top of the tallest tree. Or imagine if I said, human beings can write the most astonishing poetry, haiku, sonnets, you name it. But the sonnets of dung beetles, I mean, they're good-ish. They're just not as good as human beings. Or human beings can build incredibly complex structures, multi-story heating, ventilation, elevator shafts, you know, all that kind of stuff. But the homes of beavers, while good, don't have quite as good plumbing or HVAC systems, or, you know, some of their windows can open, which means that they're not quite as energy efficient, even though people get to breathe semi-fresh air. You understand? Human beings, in terms of stuff that I listed earlier, right? Poetry, abstract thought, philosophy, concepts, scientific method, ethics, plays, novels, you name it. There's so much that human beings do that is a difference in degree, not of kind.
Right. So now Stefan is saying that an organism's success depends on how many things it excels at, or to use his terminology, how many things it has a greater degree in. And the examples that he gives are
poetry, abstract thought, philosophy, concepts, scientific method, ethics, plays, novels.
Again, this is arbitrary, and in this case, it's not even strictly related to survival. To adequately address this, I'm going to once again use chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are better than humans, or have a greater degree than humans, in many areas. Their arboreal locomotion far exceeds ours. They're self-sufficient long before we are, and their short-term memory and processing speed is significantly better than ours. I mean, honestly, it's a thing of magic. Professor Tetsuro Matsuwara's work, which I've left a link to in the description, will blow your damn socks off. And so if you have the time, please do check it out. Anyhow, if I were so inclined, I could name countless things that are predicated on short-term memory and processing speed, such as recalling sequences, locating objects, spotting discrepancies, and predicting trajectories, and then boast that there's so much that chimpanzees do that is a difference in degree, not of kind. And this would be akin to what Stefan's just done in reference to reflective processing. Or, indeed, I could do this with pretty much anything, be it a giraffe's neck, an eagle's eye, or a kangaroo's cock.
To take the counterpoint, you can say, well, unaided, then birds can fly, but human beings can't, and that's a difference in degree, and therefore if you only have flying unaided as the standard, then birds are more successful than human beings. It's like, yeah, but you can't just take things in isolation. I mean, you can take things in isolation, but you're wrong. So if you say, well, birds can fly unaided, and then you take away technology from human beings, but that's like saying, well, if you rip the wings off a bird, then it can't fly unaided.
Another argument with himself.
Let's look at another measure of success. So, of course, success is in a conflict between two animals. The animal that wins, the animal that kills or escapes the other animal, is more successful, right? I mean, clearly, that would have to be the case, right? So, let me ask you this. Can you think, again, allowing man his full access to technology, can you think of any situation where a man faces off against an animal with all of his technology and the man loses? Right? I mean, think of a machine gun and a bear, right? I mean, think of a herd of elephants, and an airstrike.
Think of soap and Ebola, or lemon eucalyptus and the Trypanosoma brucei. You can drop a damn nuke on these organisms if you like, but they ain't going anywhere. Anyhow, now Stefan's focusing on another way in which organisms survive, that being by being at the top of the dominance hierarchy. Again, he's arbitrarily assigning significance as to support his preconceived conclusion. But in regards to this specific argument, let me repeat what I've said numerous times to creationists. Just because a species is an apex predator, or on top of the food chain, that doesn't mean that in terms of evolution, or in this case, in terms of survival as a species, it's more successful than its prey. This seems unintuitive, I get that, but it's true. The gazelle is as biologically successful as the lion. They just use different methods to survive. One dominates the hierarchy, and the other reproduces more frequently and avoids predators with incredibly fast reactions. Both methods work, and their being alive proves it.
Right now, man is the most successful species by just about any metric whatsoever. So I would consider that one pretty much asked and answered.
So I would consider that one pretty much debunked. To recap, there are countless ways in which organisms can, have, and do survive, but to focus on just one, or even a handful, such as brain power, geographic distribution, and/or position on the dominance hierarchy, is to arbitrarily assign significance. Now, the last thing I'll say on this matter is this. If the purpose of an organism is to survive as a species, then at the very least I'd put phytoplankton above humans, since they are, and have been for billions of years, at the bottom of the food chain, and hence, without them, all organisms that are predicated upon them would almost certainly go extinct, and that includes humans.
Why doesn't he have one of his gut bacteria come up and spread the word about how bad UPB is?
You know, I may not have some in my gut bacteria to show the flaws in UPB, but guess what? Without organisms such as gut bacteria, all of humanity's technology would be for naught. If bacteria were to go extinct, we would shortly follow. Anyhow, as always, thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to my wonderful patrons and those of you who have supported the channel via merchandise and PayPal. And I'll leave you with an overwhelmingly powerful argument to consider. A card game's success is defined by how many fallacy cards it has within it. And so Debunked is therefore, of course, definitely the most successful card game ever. Right? Right. Of course, right.